Hello, hello everybody.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So mm I can see only a few number of students have come. It might be because of some classes that are still going on. Uh, do you have any idea? Are there some classes going on? Hello. Has the previous class ended for CRS students? Seems that there are no CRS students in this class yet. Are there any CRS students? There are no CRS students, is it?
Sir, actually our previous class ended within 10 minutes. So we are coming to hostel and join.
Oh, so your class just ended just 10 minutes ago. That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
Okay, sure, no problem, no problem. That's fine. Yeah. So I will wait for you guys to come. Uddalok, did you manage to find out a time for the MTech
Sir,
PS?
yeah. Particular date we haven't even decided. I'll just let you know by today evening. But it is. I mean, after 6. The student had. I mean, agreed with that. So it will be after 6. I mean, not on the weekends, but it will be in the weekdays after 6.
Sure, you can have after 6 one of the days. After 6, that's fine. Just let me know so that we can accordingly fix it. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So maybe just let us wait for some more time uh, before the CR students join. Maybe you can just wait for another 5 minutes before we start. Hello, let's start now. Maybe I think whoever has to join has joined now. So before I start, I would like to just get to know again how many of how many of which group are you present right now. So let me start with this launching this poll so that you can let me know. Okay, so uh, so whoever is there from the CRS group, can you please let me know whether I should wait further? Are more people kind to join, or is it like people are not interested in coming? Either of them is fine with me.
Sir, in 5 minutes, some people will join. Actually, we had a lecture, and then we are coming to hostel. That's why it's late.
So whose lecture was this?
It was Nakib Warsi sir's lecture.
Oh, okay. And it continued till for such a long time, from 2:30 to
Yes, sir, up to 4:30.
okay.
So actually, our hostel is far from the campus. That's why some people are late.
Okay. So most of you are in this Gupta Niwas, is it?
Yes, sir, Gupta Niwas.
Okay, so this is something I have to handle. If okay, maybe we can start slowly and let's see. Hopefully, people will join, and uh, I will hopefully start with. So anyway, so for this core for this class, the one thing that is there any doubts whatever has been posted till now? Any doubts about this about the algorithm about this course? Any doubt about mm, whatever videos have been uploaded, whatever you have learned?
Sir, I have one question.
Yeah.
In the last video where it was like mentioned how to prove the correctness of algorithm with respect to binary search specifically. In the first step, it's written that we need to check the correctness for the linear part of the algorithm, which you said was the just simply the initialization that portion of my L and U. So, sir, in case, but I'm not able to like understand what's like in general this linear part term actually means. Like, is it always initialization in every algorithm,
No,
or
no,
like,
no, no. See, linear part meaning it is a not a for loop or a while loop or such things. Okay. It is not. So when I meant linear part, it means that it is not a loop.
oh, okay, so the statements that are not inside the loop.
Inside any loop, particular loop.
Okay, okay,
So sometimes an algorithm might just go on without any loop.
yes.
Okay. So that parts are the linear parts. So the algorithm, how we kind of progresses any algorithm almost. Okay, so maybe I can share my screen. You can see my screen.
Yes,
Yes,
sir, it's
sir.
Yeah. So how it starts is that it starts with some. It's like it starts from some point. Okay, then it kind of progresses. Then it might have some if statements like okay, if something happens, then do this. If something happens, then do the other one. So you can slowly create some kind of a tree kind of structure like that. There might be multiple ifs at various places and all. But then there might also be a loop here. Okay, you once you hit some place, it's like okay, as long as something is like this, then keep on doing some stuff. And when you once you have the loop, it's again continues after that, and then it might have another loop, and maybe within one loop it might have another loop. So this is a general idea of an algorithm. Okay. Now the
Okay.
standard way of trying to prove the correctness is that this anything that is not in the loop is called the linear part. Okay. Sometimes in the language of coders or language of verification persons or language of say the systems people, these are called the straight line programs. So they have no problem with that. They have some if statements, but that's about it. They are straight line. They form a tree structure. Menge's problem happens in such a situation like this, where you are not sure what is happening. It's a for loop or a while loop that has been placed. So for this settings, you basically want to apply this this concept of a loop invariant. It's like, okay, this is a loop and this is what I want it to be preserved. So by the time I leave this loop, I kind of know what should be there. Okay, what am I expecting to see in my arrays or whatever workspace rather? What do I expect? Okay, and you have to prove that the loop kind of does that. And then
So-
again, you might have another linear part, and then you again have another loop, and so on and so forth. Okay, so of course, binary search is the simplest one in some sense. We will see more and more complicated algorithms as we go along.
Okay, sir. And whenever like we are talking about this loop invariant, so how to to decide which one will, like which specific property will be regarded as that loop invariant, we have to consider the output that we are expecting from
Yeah,
that
I
loop,
mean,
right?
what do you expect? So it has some kind of a array, some kind of a variables which is storing some values and so on and so forth, right?
Okay.
Some data structure stuff that you have kind of possibly worked around a little bit, right?
Okay,
So
sir.
what do you expect it to come out? What do you
Okay.
expect at the end? And
And we
that,
need to show
yeah,
and we need to show that like we are actually getting our expected output, like that's what our the main motive of our
of the
loop
loop
will.
invariant, yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir.
The main motive of the loop invariant is that given the input is correct, and we are getting the correct output, and that you prove it kind of like a induction you can think of. Okay, I mean not induction. It's something that is kind of preserved through the loop, some property, something.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I see that there are quite a number of more people that have joined, and I'm not sure if this number will increase or not. So for everybody of you, we will. So this today's lecture will be mostly about doubt clearance, because there are 3 videos that are online. The link of it has been given. So if you have gone over it, then that is good enough. That's like a huge amount of material there. Okay. So if you have gone over it, then all that we will say is that, okay, if you have any doubts, any questions, any part of it that you have not followed completely, I mean, I will be happy to answer those. And that is basically what will be today's class. By the way, there has been the CRS group and the JRF group has given me 2 slots for hosting some kind of an tutorial session, something, the physical hopefully it will be a physical meeting, and I will update you guys in the classroom about where we are meeting regarding that and when we are meeting. Okay, so before I proceed any further, let me just to see how much you have guys done. So let me launch this poll. So these are the about these 3 videos that has been uploaded, that whose link has been given to you rather, and how. Okay, 38 of you have answered it, and I can see that quite a few of you have indeed watched at least the first video, and around half of you have watched the second video, and the last video very few people have watched. So I mean, and unfortunately enough, there are some 6 of you who have told that you have watched none of the videos. Now I completely appreciate your honesty about this, but I must also say that this course, this algorithms course, is actually not an easy course, particularly for people who have not been introduced to algorithms much before. This can be a very different, very hard course. It is much harder than the discrete math course or any of those courses that has been done before, because it actually takes a lot of effort, both from the point of view of algorithmic thinking as well as the the mathematical foundations of algorithm, mathematical foundations that is required. So in that respect, if you have not read, and if you have not seen any of this, and if you don't put in the effort yourself, then nothing much can be done. Okay, so uh, and again, I kind of cannot repeat it further. This semester is also going to be online. None of these lectures will be offline or in class. Okay, it would be an online class, because with 53 students, over around 50 students, I cannot afford to have it in class. Okay, so in that respect, you have to put in the effort, and if you don't put in the effort, I cannot do anything. Uh, so these 3 videos were uploaded, and at least some attempts should have been done from you guys' part to at least watch it to some level. Uh, okay, so that is the first thing. The second thing is that yeah, so second thing is that I will try to upload a collection of problems for your practice, and also an assignment by this weekend, and you will have to submit it within a week's time. So that will also
How
help
much time we will like to submit that?
1 week.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll get 1 week to submit that, and then there is also some problem set that will be used, that will be given for your own practice. Okay, which will, you will kind of see that, I mean, if you can do it, then it will be, you'll have some idea about whether you are understanding things or not. Okay, and good. Now coming back to this 3 videos and that are there, any other doubts that you have?
Yes, sir, I have one doubt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, in the video, you for this binary search, you used decision tree to prove that it will take not more than log n number of
Right.
comparisons.
Comparison.
So was it? So can we use such kind of decision tree for any kind of algorithm, or
No,
was it only for binary search?
No,
Binary.
it depends upon time to time. Okay, so decision tree is a very standard technique to upper bound the number of times taken. Okay, but this is not necessarily the only technique. We will see it in the next class, in only or next set of videos only, when we will be talking about some kind of recursive algorithm. Okay, and then it will be not be the decision tree that will come in picture. It will be through the recursions that also comes. There is another way you can do this of the binary search, by the way. So let me just share the screen. Okay, so this is about the amount of steps required or runtime of the runtime of binary search, right? Now, runtime of the binary search is basically the number of times, the number of steps required taken by the binary search, right? And then we had done that. We have proved using using the search tree, right? That this quantity is actually order of log n. But you can do another stuff. Okay, let me tell you how. So what is binary search? So you have a sorted array, right? X1 to Xn. So basically Xi is less than Xj. And you want to check, is the A in this X1 to Xn? This is the question, right? And the binary search basically does is that it goes to the middle one and check whether this quantity is A. If it is less than, so it has gets 3 different answers. If yes, then I get that answer. Then okay, good, A is in this array. If no, then I can also get this thing like, is the X more than A? Is more than A. So if this one, so maybe let's call this one Xi, if Xi is more than A, then I know that in that case, I must focus on this part of the array. Because since it is sorted, sorry, Xi is with Xi. Yeah. Since it is sorted, so if Xi is more than A, so if at all A exists, A cannot be here, because every point here are already more than Xi, which is more than A. So it must be here, right? And in that case, I'm going to go into looking at, what do I go into actually looking at? I basically try to go and look at, is A in X1 to, so I mean here I should have started with Xn over 2, kind of the middle one, the Xn over 2. Right? And the other one is that Xi is less than A, and in that case I focus only on this part, which is I kind of ask this question, I kind of narrow it down or change my question to, is A in n over 2 plus 1 to xn. Right? So this is basically the binary search that we do. Now, of course, you can keep on doing it and you can use it. So this I have already started drawing the tree. And from that tree, you can see that it cannot have a depth more than log n. But another way of writing it, and this is something that you can take it as an exercise also. You can write binary search as a, maybe it was done in the video. You can write binary search also as a recursive algorithm, just like here. Okay, so basically binary search of A1n. So maybe if I say binary search of A1n is basically is A within x1 to xn. I make a first question and then if I'm here, this is basically the answer is binary search of A1 n over 2. And this is binary search of A n over 2 plus 1 comma n. Where basically binary search of A ij is basically the question and the algorithm that answers is A in xi to xj. Okay, so this is the program that solves that.
So
So
here for the
sorry,
case here where xi is greater than a,
yeah,
so it will be xn by 2 minus 1, right?
yeah. Actually, that you are right, completely right. This should be xn by 2 minus 1. I mean, this all comes down to if n is even or odd and so on and so forth. Yeah, whatever. So there are certain edge cases here. Whenever we talk about this n over 2 and all, like what if n is even and whatever, or what if n is odd and so on. So those things we have to handle it carefully.
So also, sir, why the names are binary for this?
It is binary because you're getting basically you are having these two options, right? I mean, this is one option, of course, I agree, but this is like a end option. Usually you are searching in the left and the right. So that's why since you are always splitting yourself up into two parts, left and right. So that's why it's called binary search. Okay. Now, if you want to solve the time complexity for binary search, or maybe if I want to try to write this binary search using this technique, what is it? So you can say that binary search of A1 or ij. What is this? So this is basically if A is equal to x, say I plus j by 2, then output. Yes, so this is the case when I have found it. Okay. Else, if A is less than, so if A is if A is less than xi plus 1 j by 2, then I do binary search of A I plus j by 2 minus 1. And if A is bigger than xi plus j by 2, then I do binary search of A I plus j by 2 plus 1 comma j. So this is basically the binary search to some level. You have to, I have not told the initialization, what happens when I equals to j and so on and so forth. You have to do that initializations stuffs, and you do this. Now, how do I evaluate the amount of time complexity? Now the time complexity for here is, I say that, okay, so let's say T of n is the time taken. Now time meaning the number of steps or the number of steps taken by binary search when size of the array is n. Okay, so basically time taken by this binary search is how much? It should be t j minus I. Now how much time is it? Okay, I can do certain stuff and then I can apply here, right? Now this one is time taken by this binary search is therefore t, I mean the maximum array is I plus j by 2 minus 1, right? So if you do this kind of correct calculation, it should be j minus I by 2 minus 1. And similarly here, this will also be this one. The time taken for this one will also be the same thing. If you just do the calculation, you will see. So this is this minus this. So what is this one? T of j minus 1, j minus I is equals to, I have done some steps, some operations, okay? Now I have made one query and maybe I have done some query cells. So I can say this one is a constant number of queries that I have made plus 2 times, sorry, not 2 times. See, here I am doing either this or this, not both, right? In either case, I have just this much time that I am spent. So it will become, so it's not 2 times, but it's just exactly this plus j minus I by 2 minus 1. Now, if you solve this recurrence, so in other words, t of n will become order of 1 plus t of n over 2 minus 1. And if you solve this recurrence, what will happen is that you will find that this is equals to order log n. So here we are not bounding the amount of time taken by the binary search in terms of decision tree, but we are doing it in terms of using the recurrence relation. Is this fine? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so any other questions?
Sir, I had one more.
This,
Yeah, one by one. I will take every questions. Any one of you just.
sir, actually, what I was asking, this whole thing is very logical. Then why again we'll have to prove that logic, prove that algorithm? Why do we require that?
Okay, see, it's for something. Okay, so what do you have to prove? The correctness? The correctness of the algorithm?
Proof of correctness.
Okay, we will see again. For binary search, it is very simple. Okay, we are still kind of almost dealing with toy problems. Okay, but okay, there's 2 reasons for it. One thing that I would ask you guys to do is that if you are, I mean, write down, okay, write a proper program for binary search. Okay, write a proper program for binary search, and you realize that the binary search writing is slightly more complicated than it seems. The reason is the edge cases. Okay, the binary search should hold some time, right? And if you don't write the code perfectly, in other words, if you don't consider what happens when j is equals to I plus 1 and j equals to such kind of stuff, then the program might keep on going on forever. So although its overall structure seems very simple and very logical, the actual implementation part is a bit more trickier. So this is one of the problems that I will give you as this will be a programming program assignment to write down binary search from scratch in any language that you want, where I can feed in a set of array, then I can feed in a element of the array, the element which may be in the array or may not be in the array, and you have to find it out. Okay, so that is one thing. So from the point of view of high level ideas, it is simple, but from the point of view of implementation, there can be lots and lots of issues that has to be taken into account. Okay, so I mean, like for example, I am here, whatever I have written here, I have not told you when to stop. What happens if I equals to j? Then what happens? Okay, for example, this one also I have written is less than, more than, and so on. But if you don't have it less than, but less than or equal to, then things become much more complicated. So such issues can be there. That is the first answer. That is the second thing that I can only say is that you have to wait for another couple of days or couple of other classes before we start dealing with algorithms which are not necessarily obvious that they are doing correct. And for those, you need to have a formal proof. Okay. In fact, we will see a algorithm, one of my favorite algorithms actually. It's an algorithm from machine learning actually, and it's an algorithm that you will realize that is very simple, but actually proof of correctness is very hard to get. In fact, it took 30 years for scientists to come up with a proof of correctness, but it actually was correct at the end. So for proof of correctness is a requirement for such kind of stuff. So okay, of course, when we write papers, we don't go and write a proof of correctness of binary search or proof of the time complexity of binary search, because there are like very obvious things. But since you guys are starting algorithms course, so that is why these are, I mean, we are doing it correctly. Within 2-3 classes only, we will be dealing with algorithms of problems for which proof of correctness will not at all be taken. So did it answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Pallavi was asking some other question. Yeah.
Yes, sir. In the lectures, there was one topic regarding a potential function in the last video.
Right.
So actually, I was not able to understand it that well. So if you could explain it now.
In the last in that thing, right? In the
Yes, proof of correctness.
right. Now, okay, how to explain potential? So in the video, it was just told that you can use potential function. Or was there a potential function there?
Yes, it was, I guess, U minus L. You told.
Right. Okay, good. So it's U minus L for the binary search thing, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. So, so this is another trick that is used actually. Okay. So potential function is something that you use quite a lot. Okay. So maybe instead of this binary search, have you read this the first problem? I think the GCD
Yes,
algorithm.
sir. Yes, sir. Euclid's algorithm.
The Euclid's algorithm, right?
Yes, sir.
The Euclid's algorithm. Okay. The first problem is that why does this algorithm stop? And secondly is that after how much steps does it stop? Right?
Yes, sir.
Now, the fact is that what we want to do is that we have a GCD, right? We have we have A and B, and we want to find out the GCD of A and B, right?
Yes.
And we understand that what we do, we will first write B to be B as a some R1 of A plus Q0 and that so maybe and of say A0 A1, right? And then I
Yeah.
write, what do I write? I write A as basically some R2 of A1 plus A2 and so on and so forth. You keep on doing like that, right?
Yes.
Now, something is going down. What is going down?
Sir, the second argument.
This second argument.
Second argument.
So basically this line, this column, right? If I am saying this column will slowly go down. The next one will be, if I write it next will be A1 will be written as some R3 times A2 plus A3, and then it will be A2 equals to something. Now the A, this B, A1 A is less than B, A1 is less than it, A1 is less than A, A2 is less than A, and so on, right? So this is, so if I have to prove that something is stopping or prove that something is stopping within some time, what is the best way of telling you or convincing you, or most mathematical way of convincing you? To say that, see, there is some object, it's like my, it's like a, it's the wallet, okay? I have some amount of money, okay? I have some, I start with some X amount of money, and with the X amount of money, if every time I am going to spend 2 rupees, after X by 2 number of times, my wallet is done. I have nothing in my wallet, right? So this is how you kind of want to say that the maximum number of objects that I can buy, whose cost is 2 rupees, is just X by 2. Similarly, here, so it's a potential. Okay, it's this so we call this kind of stuff as a potential function. Okay, so this second argument here is you can think of as a potential function, and this potential function is going down with time. How much time do you go down by? So if you have gone over these lectures, you will see that what we say is that every 2 jumps, it goes down by a factor of 2.
A factor.
Right? So basically AI plus 1, sorry, AI plus 2 is less than AI by 2. And this is what we kind of prove. So that means if I start with a quantity which is B, whatever the number is, and every time I'm halving it, then the potential function, which is basically this column you can think of, is going down by a factor of 2 every time. Okay, and therefore the amount of, after the number of times I go down to, is basically the log of B number of steps. And this is how you prove it. So the main idea is potential functions. The idea is very simple. Okay, it is basically, if I have to prove that something is stopping, I have to think about what is it that is going down, and that is my potential function. If that is going down, after some point of time it will stop. Okay.
Okay, sir.
And potential function is just a term used for a quantity that is going down. In the case of binary search, it was exactly that. It is basically that U minus L is the potential function, and that was halving again every time, and therefore it goes up. Now we will of course see more of potential functions, which are more complicated potential functions, in the next few, in the next few algorithms that we will do.
So on this potential function only, the finiteness of our algorithm is dependent, right?
Kind of, yeah, you can think of it.
Okay.
I mean, we are proving the finiteness of algorithm through the potential.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Go
So
ahead.
I have one doubt.
Yeah.
So what is mean by average time complexity and how can we find that?
Oh, how can you find that? That is something more interesting. Okay. And okay. So there are two kind of time complexities. Okay. Okay. So I have said somebody gives me an algorithm. Say the algorithm ALG. And what it does, it takes as input, say X from some set and outputs something, outputs some Y from some another set out. Okay. So basically the alg you can think of as a map function from the set S to set out. Or maybe I should not have said yes. I could have said int. Int. So this is the input. And to output. Right? I can think of any algorithm as as something that is taking as an input something that is an input can be a graph, input can be two numbers, input can be array, I don't know, and I am outputting whatever I have supposed to output. Okay, is this clear?
Yes,
This one? Okay. Now, if I think of it this way, then the time complexity. What is time complexity? Time complexity is the is the amount of time or amount of number of steps on any input. So the time complexity of an algorithm, so okay, the time complexity is also, it basically takes in an input and it outputs a, say, natural number. This is the amount of time taken by the algorithm. So basically time complexity on an X is the amount of, or sorry, number of steps of algorithm ALG on input X. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
And I've not done anything. I've just formally defined what a time complexity of an algorithm is. Okay, given an algorithm, there is a time complexity. Now, this
Yes, sir.
time complexity is for a particular input. Okay. Now we deal with, I want to understand how good or bad is the algorithm. And for that, one of the things that we look at is called the worst case runtime or worst case time complexity. This is the most common one that we talk about. Okay. And what is this? This is the max over all the excess in the input, the time complexity on the number of times taken by the algorithm on X. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
So maybe only for one particular input, it takes a long time. For rest of the inputs, the algorithm is outputting very fast. But doesn't matter. Even then, I will say that the worst case runtime of the algorithm is bad. Okay.
Okay.
So even if for one particular input it takes a 1,000 steps, and for rest of the algorithm it takes just 2 steps. Even then, so in the worst case time complexity will be 1,000. Okay. Now the average case time complexity usually is meant by the average over this time complexity, which is that let me sum over all the time complexity that has taken is the average over that. Okay, divided by the size of the input space. Or if you are more comfortable with the probability notation, is the expected value over x drawn from the input space, the time complexity of the same. So this is the average. So it's like kind of say that, see, yes, maybe that my algorithm for some input it can take 1000 steps, but on an average it will stop at 3 steps. Okay. So this is the average amount of time. This is time average time complexity.
Okay. Thank you.
Now there are some more time complexities that we will come to later on. Okay, and you can also kind of understand. You can slowly. You can also try to understand that if your friend has wrote a program for you, say, okay. Now the program may be for 99% of the cases it is behaving very well, but for 1% of the cases it is taking forever. Right? Will you call that algorithm good or bad? That will depend upon how you are defining the concept of good and bad, right?
Yes.
And in that case, you will see that the worst case runtime is very bad because it's taking forever. It is almost not stopping, right? The average case runtime will also be very bad. But you know that, see, I know that the average case runtime is bad because for one particular input or a very small number of inputs, it is taking too much time. But for rest of them, it is doing very well. So we say something like, okay, this algorithm has a time complexity where for 99% of the cases it is very fast. Okay, how will you define that? Okay, so this complexity measures have been defined to kind of capture the concept of which algorithm is good, which algorithm is not good, and so on. And we will see a bit more of these things later on again. So we start with the worst case runtime and average case runtime. And okay, now how to calculate the average case runtime? Okay, this is the average case runtime I have told you. But most of the time, calculating the average case runtime can become very tricky. We will see possibly one example of the average case runtime. Okay.
Sir, expected time complexity and average time complexity are same.
No. So that's why. Okay. So what is expected time complexity? Okay. So this is the average time complexity. Then sometimes, okay. Now this is something that we have to understand it. Sometimes the algorithms itself are probabilistic. Okay, the algorithm might itself have some probability in it. Okay. So they might actually toss some coins and do some stuff and work around that. So expected time complexity most of the time means the randomized time complexity, which is the which means that expectation over the coin tosses of the or randomness in those algorithms. Okay, so the expected time complexity, or sometimes is called the expected time complexity. So the main difference is that this expectation is that I am drawing X from this input. Okay, but expected time complexity, or sometimes called the randomized time complexity, is basically over is basically expected. You're right, it is expectation of the time complexity, but it is also, it's called the expectation of the worst case time complexity. But expectation over what? See, the algorithm sometimes takes in some random coins, R, but R is some random set of random numbers. Its expectation over those random numbers are. Again, if you have not understood this particular concept, don't worry about it right now. I will come to randomized algorithms sometime in the when we talk about maybe in a couple of weeks time, and then we will talk about it.
Sir, does that mean that if the probability of each of the X inputs are same, then that is the average case?
That is
Otherwise,
the average. Okay, it's all about the expectation over what. Okay, so this one that we have written here, it is no, there is no, it's not a randomization here. So this one is not a randomization over here, right? It is just this statement, but this statement can be written up also like this. I'm just using the notation for expectation. There is no, it's not a probabilistic stuff.
okay, sir.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, sir. Sir, why are we always interested in the worst case but not the average case?
No, we are maintaining our interest in the average case. In fact, average case is sometimes very commonly studied also. But worst case is also something that has been, I mean, you will, what to say? Yeah, so worst case is easy to handle, let's put it this way. Okay, so in the first course of algorithms, we will be dealing mostly with our worst case, but at the same time, average case is something that we will see in many contexts. And if you do an advanced algorithms course, then you will see more of this of the average case text settings. Yeah. In real life, by the way, neither the average case nor the worst case is considered, I must say. Many times, what is considered is what I just now told, that you are happy with an algorithm that on most of the input is behaving well. Now, even that most of it is also kind of is very often more cryptically defined. For example, all the machine learning programs that are there right now, they are very bad in the worst case. They are very bad in the average case. But the usual argument there that people give, but they most of the time don't have very formal proofs, or they don't have any proof of actually, is that the idea is that if the input is occurring in real life, then the algorithm is behaving well. And it is not at all easy to see that how can you define what input is behaving in real life. So that's why they cannot quantify it. They cannot say that, oh, see, this kind of graphs are occurring in real life. But they say, oh, see, this, if you give me a graph that you have occurred in real life in some place, then in my algorithm will do very well. And to prove that, they go for this empirical results. They have a lot of, they will try out their algorithms on a number of what is called benchmark inputs, and then they will try to convince you that, oh, see, on the benchmark input they are behaving well. And that is the technique that is used in many of the real life cases. So to analyze the correctness of the algorithm, you have to run it on benchmark data and say that, oh, this is great. And but again, that might not be the best option. So a good example that I can talk about later, maybe at some point of time, is that many times when you do this kind of an empirical result kind of stuff, where you can prove that, yeah, on real life data it is behaving well, you are actually leaving a lot of fuzziness in your argument. It might be that you are accepting you are picking up an algorithm that will behave wrong badly on some important cases. And this is exactly what happens in the case of, for example, uh, say, say the say self-driven driving cars, right? Again, that is exactly the places where the accidents in self-driving cars happen. Now people will say that, see, that is not a big deal. Maybe 1 in 1,000 cars will have an accident, but that's not a big deal. Why do we care about those kind of stuff? Now, you are right, completely right. If you have if a human being was driving a car, then 1 in 1,000 accident is considered to be possibly a pretty good number. But the algorithm as a whole is not doing well or not giving the correct answer, because correct answer meaning not driving the car properly, because the algorithm has not been proved. The formal correctness of the algorithm has not been proved, and neither has the worst case or the average case complexity has been handled. Now, one extreme case of this is, if you are familiar with this recent news that happened in the last maybe 2-3 years, that there were a number of these Boeing flights that went down. Right, they had accidents. This one that in Malaysia, and many of them I think 4 flights went down. And it was all because of this exact problem. The autopilot algorithm was not designed to handle worst case situation. And now you see, it is not necessarily the best option. It depends upon where you are. I mean, if it depends upon what is the context we are talking about. So, so there are algorithms for which we would really want worst case analysis. There are instances where we really want very good correctness algorithms. And then there are algorithms where possibly some kind of a average case complexity or some kind of empirical arguments is good enough also. Yeah, so this is something that I think you will face it a lot, because many of you will be doing a course in machine learning or image processing and this kind of stuff. And you will see that many of the algorithms will not have formal correctness proof. But that doesn't mean that they are bad, because I mean, they don't have formal correctness proof because we have not been able to produce a formally correct proof. But maybe that, but still, particularly if they're implemented or if they applied for some certain not so important work, that's perfectly good. So, by the how many of you are actually taking machine learning or these courses right now?
Sir, I am taking.
Sir, I am also taking.
Yeah.
I'm also taking.
I think all CS students are also taking the ML.
All CS students are taking. Very good. Yeah, so that's a very beautiful subject, by the way. But you should keep this one in mind also always. That, I mean, it's a trade-off. I mean, the machine learning as a subject is outstanding, and it does have some. The old algorithms are pretty much very nice and beautiful. We will be covering some of them in this class also. And then the new algorithms are very important and very useful because they are very fast and very nice and all. But it is achieved by giving up a little bit on the correctness part or formally correct part. Okay. I mean, there is a whole subject of work. I am also personally involved in a few of them, where the job is to actually have the verification part done. If somebody comes up with an algorithm, how do you check the correctness of that algorithm? Yeah, but anyways, those are much more advanced things for now. Okay, so any other questions, doubts?
Sir, for the randomized kind of algorithms, how this kind of proof of, the proof of correctness are defined? I mean, they're as they're randomized, so
So
they're
random statement will be randomized. Okay, so statement is something like, for a randomized algorithm, the statement can be given any input with probability 0.9, the algorithm will give a correct answer. Okay, so that is a formal statement of a randomized algorithm, and you prove that
Okay.
statement.
Okay. Okay. So, as you were speaking about the, some ML algorithms, I think for most of the neural nets, the proof of correctness are, not that formal as
Yeah,
I
neural
have
net,
read some.
particularly neural networks right now, the proof of correctness are not that formal. And so there is some, so that's what I told. I mean, for main, it is being applied, and the applications are very amazing, very extensive applications. But there are some major glitches at times. So you need to, both these worlds are required. It's a trade-off between this or demand and supply. I mean, in fact, this Boeing's crashes was exactly because they had uh, changed the autopilot programs from the old school programs to new school neural networks, which did not have formal correctness proofs. And earlier it was less it was less, there were some interventions were there for required from the pilot's point of view, and nowadays they wanted to make the super fast programs that uh, uh, that were doing some outstanding job. But somehow or other, in the extreme cases, meaning maybe the environmental issues were such that the algorithm was not trained with that particular data, and now the algorithm misbehaved because the algorithm was not trained, and the algorithm could not learn that how to handle that particular setting. So if you have followed that, those kind of crashes, most of the crashes were the autopilot, did not allow the actual pilot to take over, and the autopilot gave instruction to the plane to kind of nosedive into wherever they could. So it's a very weird kind of a problem that was glitch that was there, and Boeing had to finally recall that whole software after a few crashes that happened.
Okay. As, the swarm algorithms for optimization, do they have some good proof of correctness, formal proof of correctness
Many
proofs?
of them has. Many of them has.
Okay. Actually, I think there are lots and lots of algorithms are now generating, and so I think that most of them are very much imitated from the real life scenarios. So I do think that do they even have proof of correctness kind of proofs, formal proofs like?
Many of them. We will go over so many of the problems, which you'll be quite surprised that there are proof of correctness for that. Okay. But then there are other things that we have to talk about later on in this course. It is not always the proof of correctness that matters. It is actually the time complexity that matters. Most of the algorithms, it is very easy to come up with an algorithm that has correct it is correct and give a formal proof of correctness. But those algorithms are not fast enough for us. Okay, now how do you make it fast? Sometimes people say that, okay, see, here is an algorithm, that algorithm is always correct. But the speed is something that I'm not guaranteeing you. The speed is most of the time fast, or on real data it is fast, but in the worst case it is not fast. So such things are there. Quite a lot of this kind of stuff are there. So we will be talking about it as we go on. I mean, the later half of this course will be devoted on those kind of problems. Yeah. Any other questions? No more questions? So if there's no more questions, yeah, go ahead.
Sir?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is algorithm a computable function?
Is algorithm a computable function? I mean, see, okay, first of all, you have to, I mean, it's a kind of ill-formed question.
Hello? Sorry?
It is an ill-formed question.
I mean, a computable function is something
It's, I mean,
which
algorithm is a computable function? Any algorithm?
That's what my question. Yeah, any algorithm. Yeah.
No, of course not. No, it's not.
So some algorithms may be non-computable, right?
Yeah.
Cannot. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I
Like
mean, I don't want to go into it, but if you have seen the
Ackermann function,
you can. Okay, so that's what you mean. Okay, good.
No, Ackermann function is still computable, right?
Hold on. So what you are asking is something different. What you are asking is that the which all functions are computable.
Yes, sir.
Which are functions in terms of functions of numbers, functions of real functions.
Yes.
Which all functions that takes from real number to real number are computable. And like, for example, is Ackermann function computable? Is log n computable? Is log star computable, and so on. Now, many of them are not. Okay, but I really don't want to go into this particular topic in this course, mostly because this is not a topic of this course. If you want to know the answer to these questions, you should follow the automata theory course.
Okay.
Okay. Now, for talking about computability and all, we have to go into Turing machines and all of those kind of stuff and so on and so forth. So I don't want to go into these things here at all.
Okay.
In the automata theory course, you can ask this set of questions and you will get the answer. Which functions are computable with them.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So Shiva Kumar, so you are from which group?
CRS.
Yeah. So you have an automata theory course going on now?
Last semester we had it, but not rigorous enough for me, at least.
Okay. Who taught it?
Anisu sir.
Anisu taught it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want, I can help you with this thing, but not in this.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thanks.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, what about rest of you? Any other doubts, any other questions that you have on this algorithms course? Yeah? Okay, so if not, then we can stop here now. So we will meet again on Tuesday at 2:30, and it will be in this same place. We will upload you a set of assignments and problem sets that you try to solve. And for whoever has not gone over the 3 videos, please go over those 3 videos. In the next class, I will start from those 3 videos and continue with with whatever next I will be. Okay. Okay, so maybe I'll stop the class now.
Thank you, sir.